The Libertarian State Leadership Alliance presents our 2017 National Conference, The Future of the Libertarian Political Movement. The open discussion session, all conference participants welcome, on The Future of the Libertarian Political Movement, moderated by George Phillies.
And so welcome to this last session of the day. The panel is The Future of the Libertarian Political Movement. I have a few provocative questions if people want them, but otherwise we might discuss where we are, what we ought to be doing. We just had a presidential campaign and national campaign and federal and state and local campaigns that people might want to discuss. There's always fundraising to discuss. So who wants to say something? Let me propose a provocative question then, which some of you will have followed, those of you who were state chairs in particular. The last presidential campaign did something very positive and provocative. They set up a victory fund. The deal on a victory fund is that you pool the National Committee fundraising total limit, the fundraising limits of large numbers of state parties that are FEC filing, and you then go to large donors, of which we actually do have a small number. The utility of this is not that it lets you on paper raise any more money, it's that the donor writes one check for $100-something thousand. It goes to the victory fund. It's shared donation. That's a perfectly legal $100,000 donation, even though no one separately could take it. And you can raise large amounts of money this way with relatively limited effort. The last one had two minor disadvantages. One was the sentence in the contract that state parties will probably see no money coming back to them out of this. And the other was the, gee, how does the money get spent? And you can look that one up for yourself. And my suggestion is that instead of waiting around for a presidential candidate to do this, that the National Committee and the National Congressional Committee and the state parties should set this up now with the deal that half of the money goes back to the state parties in proportion to their donation total limits, and ditto national. The other half is used to advance the national party, national libertarian movement by doing advertising. This is all FEC money, so it can be used close to an election to get out the vote. So what do people think of this bizarre idea? Anyone?
Well, the main disadvantage is if you're a non-FEC state, you can't participate.
To repeat what was said, since I'm not sure the camera's picking this up, if you're a non-FEC filing state, you cannot participate. And that's absolutely correct. Anyone else?
Yeah, it kind of strikes me as a bit of top-down in the National Party trying to control my campaign a little bit. You can understand we want to see some stuff out of campaigns that help long-term the party, but it strikes me a little heavy-handed.
It certainly could be if the National told you what to do with your money. Absolutely. Minor comment here. If your state party is doing get out the vote or voter registration, those are the main things, within 90 days of an election where there's a federal candidate on the ballot, that's federal election activity, and you have to do it through an FEC filing campaign. You might carry that bit of wisdom back to your state so they don't get in possible legal trouble someday.
Yeah, that was one of the advantages of Maine joining. It's like, we didn't realize that, and suddenly we were part of the victory thing, and so that part of the filing was handled for us by their consultants.
That leads to a question. Since Maine chose to start FEC filing to join the Victory Fund, did you shut down FEC filing?
Afterwards, it got shut down. I mean, we can start it up again if we want to do it ourselves. ourselves.
Well, let me pose a different question. Since we just survived a presidential campaign, let's look forward to 2020. What would you like to see done better in 2020? Not saying anything was done less than perfectly last time, but what would you like to see done better?
Earlier convention. We're running a national campaign on 4 months. That's not enough time to run a presidential campaign. So have the convention earlier in the year so those candidates, and if you're in a state, well...
I'd say the fall of the previous year.
I mean, however early, I mean, at least a few months earlier, potentially the prior, potentially a year.
January, February.
Yeah, I think that would give the campaigns, and the few states where we have to petition, having the actual candidate nominated earlier makes that a lot easier in many cases as well.
A historical note that you young folks may not know: for many years, until fairly recently, our national convention was in summer of the odd-numbered years. Yep. The point of this was it gave us the year to do publicity for the presidential campaign, fundraising, and all these other good things. There was a specific reason for changing, and the notion was that if we had the convention in summer of the even-numbered year, like summer 2020, our presidential candidates could participate in presidential primaries and get all sorts of publicity. Having actually run for...
And matching funds.
Yes,
The primary matching.
Yes, and primary matching funds, though you note the one presidential campaign that did this lost money on the deal. Having run for president, I will drop in the comment that you don't get publicity out of primaries. At least we didn't in 2008. Other comments on the presidential campaign? What would you like to see done better?
Less money going to consultants.
It's funny, what?
Going to consultants.
Oh, yeah. That's up to the candidate.
Yeah, that's,
Still something I'd like to see done differently.
yeah,
But that's a candidate choice.
yeah.
Yeah, and a donor choice too. If you don't like how they're spending it, don't give it to them.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Other discussion? What would you like to see done that has not been? Yes.
I'd like to see some more prepping of answers before people go into debates. While I understand that debate answers are that individual candidates' responses and their beliefs, we had Gary Johnson make a statement speaking for GSM libertarians without consulting GSM libertarians or the caucus about GSM libertarians. Things like Bake the Cake followed us. And it's still following us. And that would not have been the response for the majority of GSM libertarians. And I wish that our candidates have a little bit more prepping and a little bit more faith in the membership and the activists to come to us and discuss issues instead of just speaking without thinking.
That's why you're, yeah.
I would like to see more libertarian activists focus on a more positive message as opposed to just bashing government all the time, because that's what I've seen in the last 20 years that I've been involved off and on with the party, and it just hasn't worked. And I think the message that we should send should be that we are for a peaceful and prosperous society, and that liberty is the best way to get there. And I know that we're the party of principle, and I don't deny that, and the principles help keep us grounded and help keep us focused on how legislation is good and bad, but I think the message that we have to send has to be a positive one, because I don't think we're going to reach enough voters if we don't do that.
Emotional based.
Yeah.
Something that I saw in this past campaign that I actually liked was there were more PACs out there doing independent spending for our candidates. And some of us wanted to see certain spending certain ways. That was one way of doing it, going outside the campaign. Maybe all of our First Amendment rights, let's use them.
Other discussion on the future?
And something, now that 30 some odd 40 states have ballot status or major party status. Should state affiliates start having binding primaries?
Yeah.
That would be one way to vet candidates before we get to convention. If they have to go through a primary process, you get to find out the ones who can't speak in public or have bad answers.
Yeah, we had people up on those stages in the primary debates.
I mean, each state affiliate obviously gets to set their delegation rules, but having binding primaries would A, force the campaigns to get started earlier, and might get some of this vetting that would have been nice to know earlier in some cases, but that's each state gets to decide that.
I don't know. I'm personally against bound delegates. I think that's one of the things that sets us apart, at least from the Democrats and, well, actually the Republicans as well. But like, I don't know, man.
But you don't have to bind all the delegates. You could bind, half of them.
Ooh.
You could.
Oh.
Super delegates.
Yeah.
No, you're not a super delegate.
You're not a super delegate, but you're still, yeah.
You have superior if you're not bound.
Should we allow states to bind delegates?
They can.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I think that that's, a thing that states should choose. I would not want New Hampshire to bind delegates.
Like it could lead to a hostile takeover if we had a celebrity type that wasn't
Right.
all that libertarian and decide to run.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
Howard Stern's scenario.
Yeah.
On the subject of bound delegates, in the state of Arizona, we are required that anybody who registers as libertarian is counted as a state party member.
Ooh.
So we have no way of even having a non-aggression principle pledge, no way of knowing whether that person even knows about our principles or not. And we would have all of those people voting in our primary, potentially binding a candidate.
Right.
Each state has different circumstances, so they have to look it up. But I'm just curious if states might want to start doing that to.
Massachusetts found a solution to what you're describing in Arizona, at least as this was put into place in 1996. The Libertarians were a major party, so there were primaries to elect a state committee and appointments to fill vacancies. This got complicated. However, the National Party affiliate was not the Libertarian Party of Massachusetts. It was the Libertarian Association of Massachusetts, which was a private dues-collecting organization that could do what it chose in terms of one thing or another. And there's no particular reason why, if the state wants to set up a state party with primaries and state committee, why the National Party has to recognize that as the affiliate. And that solves your problem for you. And you do all the things you are required to do legally, it's just they don't have the same meaning. The other way to avoid that, of course, in terms of presidential primary, is to have the convention the previous year. Okay, you've had a presidential primary, we selected our candidate last year, what does it mean?
I wanted to point out, George, like when the nation's attention is on the Iowa caucuses and they see the Democrats and the Republicans caucusing and there's no Libertarian caucus, then the nation's attention goes to New Hampshire primaries and they see the Democrats going through their primary, the Republicans going through their primary, and there's no Libertarian primary. So they're missing, I think, that important time when people are really paying attention, or at least some people are paying attention. And basically they were saying, well, we do something later on. So they're kind of missing that whole press attention and people's attention on those important sweeps.
Do you think we would
That's one
actually
of the
get more
down-
attention from the press? Yeah, that may not help.
There was a little bit of attention in '92 when the Libertarians had ballot access in New Hampshire, and was it Moreau, who had been selected as the nominee in the fall of '91, and there was a targeted campaign at Dixville Notch. So it got a little bit of press, but it didn't carry on from February or March all the way through November.
What is the situation in Iowa, Jake?
Well, now we're an official major party, so we can have caucuses. Of course, they're non-binding, but we can have caucuses just like the Democrats and Republicans. I would anticipate that we will do that, we do plan on it, and that there will probably be at least a little bit of publicity for that. Now, how much, You know, you get to the reporters, sometimes they don't have much going on, they'll cover anything. I mean, they cover Rick Santorum of all people, who has no chance. So hey, we'll get some coverage, I'm sure of that. How much, I don't know, though.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be worth it, like, for the New Hampshire primary, because now that we have ballot access, well, we might not have it in 2020, but now that we have ballot access, it would behoove the candidates that do run for president for the Libertarian Party to come to New Hampshire, to file to run in New Hampshire.
Pay $1,000 to get on a primary that is basically a straw poll.
Right. But it would behoove them to just basically pay that to get the attention. And if they come and they stay for a little bit and actually campaign, go to the classic diners that every candidate comes by and stops at, you know, that would be an opportunity for a lot of free press for the cost of filing. Now, obviously, that primary can't be binding under our national party's rules, but it can. Wait.
You can't bind the entire state. You can have, we send bind delegates.
Well, no, I'm saying that currently we don't have any bound.
We don't have any
delegates.
bylaws for that.
Right, exactly. It would have to be addressed, but I'm saying that it would behoove the candidates to do that simply because of the press coverage, because there's tons of it, and it's worth a hell of a lot more than the $2,000 filing fee.
So you get to actually practice campaigning.
Right.
Yeah.
So, to address one of Mike's concerns about, you know, in Arizona, everybody that's registered as a Libertarian, the state has deemed you're a member of the Libertarian Party. Colorado has a similar situation, and they require all of their party officers and candidates and delegates to the national convention to sign a statement affirming support of the statement of principles of the party. So that might be a workaround in Arizona to where it incorporates something into the bylaws of, oh, you're a party member? Okay, well, if you actually want to be an officer or a delegate, you have to sign this.
Other discussion?
I don't know if any formal action can actually be taken on this, but what I would hope that in the future, no candidates for president or vice president parachute in rather late in the process. And good or bad about Bill Weld, it was made so much more awkward when it happened after all the state conventions happened.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bob Barr did approximately the same thing.
Yeah, but everybody knew he was coming.
Barr had also been on the LNC for about a year and a half as well.
Yeah.
That's a
And
bylaw.
it's definitely within the purview of the National Party to say anybody seeking the presidential or vice presidential nomination, or anybody wanting to be a delegate, must be a member of the party for a certain period of time.
Yeah.
It's one of my hopes that the party grows and there's actually more competition to be a delegate. Which is why I tried to expand the size of it. They did once years ago. I think they could shrink back down the number of delegates.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I thought the convention coverage was unattractive, not good outreach. Just saying. Thank you.
Are you thinking of the national chair candidate who?
Yep.
Provided entertainment.
There was more than one thing that was going on. I
It
was
was
pretty
entertaining.
appalled. I mean, it's just like if you just go out to work and all the time and you just get beyond a lot of foolishness. We're not in college. We're not, you know, it's just like there's, I'm really glad to hear like a shift where people are really, you know, I mean, it's going to be worth something because, you know, I've been really lazy, I admit, and I have to get off my own personal and get busy. But I want to work with some of the people that are, you know, that are not doing really insane things that is going to discredit me in the community. And it's not like we have to make the final arguments when we're just talking to regular people. Thank you.
Larry?
I think that's an important issue, but at the same time, remember something, we're going to make mistakes again. It's going to happen. We're going to make mistakes again. We're going to have faux pas. That's going to happen again. We're a part that's growing. We're going to have growing pains. I think we should accept that as truth. That's going to happen. And when things go wrong, I would hope that all of us who consider ourselves leaders at all in this party will try to be open enough to admit when you make a mistake, be lean enough for someone to admit that they may have made a mistake, and to try to move on from there and to make things better and just try to make it happen. It's not always going to be 100%. I think we should always try to the best of our ability to understand mistakes will be made, and they're going to keep getting made. But that's the way we grow. We will fail our way to success.
It's just really tough being a libertarian because you can't even enforce it. I mean, it's just like, yeah, then you're not libertarian.
Realistically, having the worst gaffes, we do not run the media.
Yeah.
So the only thing you ever see at a libertarian convention where you don't personally attend, the only thing you ever see are the gaffes.
Yeah, right. No, but just
That's
on
it.
YouTube and stuff, I don't know.
Yeah, but our candidates are going to make gaffes again, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be another
I
going to happen.
I thought the regular stuff, like Johnson, I thought he was doing fine. I had no criticism about him. It was just some of the others and the leather stuff, which, listen, I'm tolerant. I'm not like, okay, but it wasn't like an image I just thought was going to help.
It makes it harder to talk to people.
It makes it harder to talk to these Yankees around here, you know?
Yeah.
I think you're next.
Leslie. Me? Yeah.
No, you're second. Sean,
okay. I was, as far as embarrassments at the convention, I was more embarrassed by the moderator of the presidential debate. There were questions that just seemed like, what, are we going to have a time travel back to other eras and work history? It seemed really off. I mean, contrast that with 4 years prior, the presidential debate we had, which I thought, like, Lee Wright's finest hour, with him and Johnson giving a perfect example of the principle, the hardcore principle and the pragmatic, which I thought at the time was like the perfect presentation of what the LP is broadly to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, Larry Elder had a lot of gotcha questions.
While I don't necessarily agree with some of the shenanigans that went on stage during those speeches, I'm hesitant to say that it makes it harder to appeal to the everyday person, because I think that's putting a preference on a particular type of person. Those shenanigans brought people in. They may have pushed some others away, but they also brought people in. And yes, the mainstream person was probably put off, but we're not only looking to bring in mainstream people. The Libertarian Party, because of our focus on individualism, is a party of freaks and weirdos and
narcissists. Let's just say it. I mean, you know, it's just like these people are like on display on attention kind of thing. They want to say the craziest thing, you know, like, like, I'm sorry, like.
I'm sorry, but it brought a lot of people in. It may not have been the people you talked to, but it brought people in, and it told them that they were welcome to express their own voice with us. And I appreciated that, even though I disagreed with how he did it.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, how he did it was wrong.
I
Yes, yeah, right. How he did it was wrong.
But I think it's crucial that we don't say that it pushed people away, and it only pushed people away. It brought people in, and we can't focus on only talking to one type of person.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I agree with that part.
It's more so of the net, the net gain. Is there a net gain? Or are you, by doing something like that, are you alienating more people than it could potentially bring in? And I think the answer to that question is yes. There is definitely a greater amount of people alienated than brought in.
I don't think we have any data that can tell us either way.
Look, we don't have data, but
We don't have
all our
data,
experiences, a
but-
lot of people don't take us seriously.
Yeah.
I say libertarian, they say, oh, at your convention there was a fat guy dancing naked.
Literally, I have heard that so many times.
I've heard that a million times.
They don't take
But
us
don't
seriously
you
as a
think
party
you should
because they're always-
discriminate from what, something about, there was it was just came out like pedophile. We really want to embrace pedophiles or something in our party. Now, I don't remember exactly what was said.
I just want to be cautious about alienating the punks and the GSM and the racial minorities
Of course,
and
I would
ethnic
too.
minorities.
I don't think that's even an issue.
I don't think there's a disagreement on
Yeah,
that.
it's not even an issue. You don't want to alienate anyone.
No.
That's the whole point.
You're saying that your
Not
report
issue.
came close.
It isn't with me.
Not at all with me either.
But it's
At all.
me, I was like, I just didn't want to say exactly who I was talking about, but it wasn't, to me, I think that, I don't know all the initials and stuff, and I'm sorry, but I feel like, I feel like we've come a long ways, you know?
It's GSM.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
GSM's even short and they're LGBT.
Very good, Larry.
I don't
Just one
mean to-
initial now.
Does anyone
Yeah.
else want to get into
Sorry
the
about that.
conversation?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other topics we would like to discuss?
This actually brings up something came up earlier about how the LP outreaches or the themes we talk about. I mean, it seems to have varied for a time. For a while, it felt like all our outreach was on, quote, the right. It was all economic issues. It was all
Yeah.
making us very presentable to the country club set, and we're a much more, quote, mainstream audience. And we seem to be let, other than, you know, we talk about, well, maybe the drug war, we sort of kept that up. But we weren't really talking about some of these other issues that either were socially libertarian or maybe some really sort of forward-thinking, like pushing the envelope that we...
Anti-war stuff.
Yeah, but having a more balanced approach to the issues, and we seem to be turning the corner on that from my perspective, but maybe doing a much more consciously balanced approach to the kinds of outreach we do, who we're trying to outreach, the themes we talk about.
Well, this is part of why the cake fiasco was so upsetting.
Well, and that was perhaps some more education needed to be done with Garrett. But I think he thought it was a tough question. He gave an honest answer. At least he owned it.
Yeah.
Whether we agree with it or not is water under the bridge. But again, we could talk about all these different issues. I don't think, well, it's only come up recently, but should we be making much? I think the party would do well to make a better effort, a more balanced approach to the issues we talk about and how much we talk about them. I don't know what the mix is.
How many of you remember the LP's campaign against Know Your Customer, the banking regulation? That was something that was quite successful. It even worked. One might suggest, I should throw out an idea. We have huge amounts of polling data, which other people have been kind enough to pay for already. We take the polling data and we find the issues where the two other parties agree on a topic and the American people agree with us instead. And we pursue those as the topics, and they may be not necessarily always the best topics in every respect, and they may not be the most interesting topics, but they are the topics where there is a wedge and the American people realize they, or at least the majority of them, they like us. With respect to presidential campaigns and mistakes, the largest two mistakes of the last presidential cycle were the Republicans nominating Trump and the Democrats nominating Clinton. And it's hard to compete with those two mistakes. However, my suggestion is, in fact, when the LP was looking for consultants, I've organized a consulting group that proposed to do exactly what I just said. Maybe the LNC never heard about it, though we did submit a plan. And the proposal was we take all the polling data, and for example, end foreign intervention. That was very popular. Other parties disagreed.
The LNC did see it.
Oh, did see it?
Yes, yes.
Oh, good.
Yes, did see it.
You're the first person who had found on the LNC who was willing to say that.
Yes, did see it.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Darryl.
Somewhat related, and I'm glad you mentioned the Know Your Customer thing, because that's what I was going to ask about. That was mentioned during the surveillance discussion earlier. Why did the LP, National, or LNC, whoever was behind the full-page ads in the New York Times, why did that whole thing stop?
As I recall, this is of course 20 years ago, there were two or three issues. The first was they did try some second thing, like abolishing the income tax, or I forget what it was, I'm afraid, but it was something like that. And it did not sell with donors. And so they tried it, and it did not bring in large numbers of names, and it did not bring in large numbers of money. The second issue is that we are closing in on 2000. You can read the details in my book, Funding Liberty. And there was a certain amount of unhappiness with the way the LNC had conducted its affairs, in addition to which the LNC had launched this membership recruitment campaign. They spent a lot of money on recruiting members. And I am assured by Mark Tunievich that as opposed to modern efforts to recruit members, they spent so much money per head brought in, they could never break even on it. And then they got into financial troubles, and then for a variety of reasons, membership fell very drastically from 30,000, 3,000, down toward, I think it got to 20,000, but they were from financial difficulties. In fact, 2000, if I recall, it was, audit report used the phrase that it was unclear that the LNC would be able to proceed going forwards, in essence, because it was broke. And so there were a whole bunch of managerial and financial problems, and we never went back to it, even though it had worked. That's one of the things I think the LNC should do. In theory, the LSLA, if it had enough money to do that, since it's not advocating for a candidate, LSLA, that's us, we're not FEC filing. So there's certain that we can't help your candidates, we can't do get out the vote, we can't do vote libertarian close to an election, but there are all sorts of other things we can do. We had money. Mentioning which, unless there is more discussion, I believe Larry Sharp had volunteered to demonstrate and maybe raise a few bucks for us.
Oh, we're doing that now?
I shall mildly note that I've put about $3,500 of my own money into this event so far. So I've made a minor donation of my own, but I can afford to. Capitalism.
The Libertarian State Leadership Alliance